to an episode of I Take
D.
Here's our second season, episode 1 of season 2. It's been a long time.
Yes.
So we're back with you again. My name is Joel.
My name is Carla.
And we've been married for 17 years. And this is the I Take D ministry. Is something that we thought about just to share our own experiences, because we found out that sometimes the things that we go through, others go through as well. We just never really talk about them. So we're not experts. We just want to share our experiences. Maybe they can help you throughout your marriage, whether you've been married for a year, you've been married for 30 years.
Yes.
That we can be of support to you through the I Take D ministry. So tell us today's topic.
So today we're going to talk about honesty in marriage.
That's a tough one. You know, I want to share a scripture because this is, you know, a Christian-based ministry, and we're going to use Ephesians 4 verses 2 and 3, which says, "Be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace." And so, as my wife mentioned, we are going to talk about honesty in marriage. And this is a hard one because I know that with honesty, a lot of times we're afraid that by being honest with our spouse, we're really being vulnerable and we're opening our hearts to feelings and maybe experiences that we really don't allow people in.
That's true. I mean, I think, when we open up our trust to our spouses, just to anyone, we begin to open certain things, so in areas that we're not willing to be open in, and vulnerability is a big thing, because now you're opening yourself to areas that possibly it's gonna cost you some pain and some hurt, and many of us don't want to fully, and it's in our human nature not to open up to conversations that you really don't want to have, but with our spouses is so important, because that's just not a friend, that's just not someone from your next door neighbor. This is the person that you chose to live the rest of your life with. This is the one that you make those vows on the altar, and this is the person that you're going to live with. And it's important that we begin to share even our deepest secrets, right? Because I think it allows us room to grow in our marriage when we begin to be open with our spouse and beginning to share certain things that we may not have felt comfortable before, but because of the sake of what sacred marriage is and is all about, it's important for us to begin to let go of ourselves and begin to share with our spouse respectfully. Loving is really important. Those areas that need to be opened up in our marriage.
I think timing also is very important to put into perspective. There are things that you might not want to share at the beginning of your marriage, not because you're trying to hide something, but there's always a time and place and opportunity to share certain information. There's certain things that can be so deep that it takes a while before you can truly trust that person. We don't expect you to trust your spouse within the first year of marriage. Some can. I'm not saying it can't happen, but for others, it takes time for you to get to know that person, for you to really work through those issues in your own marriage. But I can say, when we first got married, one of my difficulties was just being able to be honest. Not because I wanted to hide things from you, but, there were moments where I knew they were going to make me vulnerable. And I just didn't know whether you were going to judge me or not, and so I shied away from being honest. One, because I just didn't know I didn't know how to say it. I didn't, my biggest worry was like, oh my God, I don't even know how to say this. I don't know what words to find. And it was hard. It was very hard.
And I think from a spouse perspective, hearing your husband share that with you, and we have to be willing also to listen, right? Not to jump to certain scenarios right away. Just listen. Listening is so important. And I think from my perspective too, as he began to share with me, I began to also share things that were not bothering me in our marriage and even in our intimacy, but with a way that it was was loving and respectful. But when we began to trust each other in our relationship, I was afraid that if I told you something or shared something with you that you were going to feel like I was trying to control you or I was trying to change you.
Yeah.
And I had to work with myself in a different area on how do I approach my husband lovingly, that he doesn't take it, right? That I'm trying to change him in any way, but I'm only sharing certain things and being honest with him because I want our marriage to grow stronger. I want to be able to, for him to trust me and for him and for I to trust him. And those are the things that we need to realize when we begin to have those tough conversations with our spouses. Like, are they ready to have those conversations? And if they are, step by step, how do we begin to move that? Because I don't think it happens from one day to another. I think it just takes years, but it also takes the willingness to being able to have those conversations with your spouse.
Right. You can't shy away from the conversations just because they're difficult. I think like you said, it definitely takes time. For some, it happens right away. They have that trust. The one thing I would share is be very careful with this whole thing. I'm gonna be brutally honest, because the word brutally can damage. It can hurt people, and that's not what we're talking about here. When we talk about honesty, we're talking about honesty that's tender, honesty that's loving, that focuses on caring for the other person. Yes, you want to be honest. You want to put everything out there. You want to be able to work through these issues, challenges, or maybe something you want to share with your spouse, or maybe their attitude, or something that they do or say that hurts you or that bothers you. And you want to be honest with these things, but you have to do it with care. And again, it goes back to timing, when, how. I always talk about, and we've talked about this in our communication with your spouse, that always using the I, so you don't put it all on the other person.
Exactly.
You never know. Maybe they didn't there's been times you share stuff with me that I'm like, I didn't know I was doing that to you. I didn't know that that's how you felt when I did something or I said something. Giving the other person the opportunity to not come out with an excuse of why they say what they said or what they do, but just an opportunity for them to explain, or to say to you, you know what, I really didn't know that you felt that way.
And it's important because one of the things we were sharing with each other is like when we it's the unspoken things that limits our intimacy and that potentially kills it, right? So when we don't speak honestly, lovingly to our spouses about certain things that really hurt our feelings, that are really uncomfortable, if you don't begin to share that with your spouse, if I can't share that with you, then how can we grow together? And I think that's so important, because a relationship is based on one, our marriage is based on one, and if we can't grow, if we're just going to be stuck in that one level and not grow any further because we don't want to speak about certain things in our relationship, then little by little it begins to taint our relationship and begins to kill certain things.
Yeah, I think and I don't want to generalize things and be sexist about this statement, but I think a lot of times women can express that better than men. And I can think of one where I remember one day you shared with me, and it was actually very loving. At first, I'll be honest, we started almost arguing and going back and forth until Carla was able to really express what she wanted to say to me. And what was happening was that every time her and I were invited to speak somewhere, I would take control of what we needed to say and how we needed to say it. And all it was is that me procrastinating and waiting until the last minute. So then I would be rushing and trying to say, okay, honey, you're going to say this and I'm going to say that. And then we'll go back and forth. And at first we started with arguing about it because, Carla was like, you're procrastinating. I can't stand this. I feel like you don't trust me with what I can say within the context of what we are presenting. And it wasn't until she said that she said, I feel like you don't trust that I can write my own things, that I said, oh boy. And I told her, I remember telling her, I said, that was not my intention at all, because I always tell her, I believe in you, because I do, and I want her to express what she has in her heart, because she has so much to share. But I did not realize that by doing that, I was making her feel like I didn't trust or I did not like what she had to say every time we went somewhere or we were invited to speak or had a speaking engagement. So she was able to express that, and that allowed me to internalize that and say, that's not how I want my wife to feel. You know, that goes in with her self-esteem. That's not how I want her to feel. And thank God you expressed that, because I would have continued to do that if you never share that with me, or if you weren't honest with me in a loving, kind way. Although we started in an ugly place, we were able to kind of reset and get to a good place.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that helps, and I told that for any spouse there that begins to shut down immediately because the conflict begins, and something that you addressed that it was bothering you, you know, we didn't allow us to shut down. We allow, even though it became a little conflict and you know, one of us felt uncomfortable, we began to speak to each other in a way that is not about making you feel uncomfortable or not, or disrespecting you in any way, or feeling unloving. Is that we need to talk about this, right, in order for us to fix it. Because if we would have kept it, you know, it would have just been piling up on me, you know, more and more and more, and just become to the point that I was so frustrated. So don't shut down with your spouse. Allow that conversation, even though that you feel like is you know, it's not going anywhere. Just allow the conversation to take place really lovingly and respectfully and with each other until you get to that area. It's like, okay, you know, that takes away also pridefulness.
Oh yeah.
You know, your pride has to be set to the side, because you have to be willing to take those criticisms, right?
Yeah.
And be able to share that with your spouse. And even though it feels some type of way, you have to let your spouse be heard in that area.
Yeah, you know, and I also think that for the husband, you know, avoid trying to talk with your wife like she's your daughter, and for the wife, avoid speaking to your husband like he's your son or your daughter, like they're your kids. Always avoid that. Don't talk down to each other. Don't say things in a way where you're just making a demand, but more having a conversation. You know, there are times that you're gonna have to stop there and kind of, you know, step back a little bit, wait a couple minutes or whatever it is, but always return back to the conversation. You know, just reevaluate where you are. Maybe it's getting a little heated, so step back a little bit and come back to the conversation. But it's so important to be respectful about how you're going to share that. And if you don't know how to share and you feel like, it's happened to me, where I'm like, how am I going to say this? Because I'm mad. I'm angry right now. I really want to tell her off. What's helped me, I don't know if it can help you, so I'll share with you in case it's something that you can do. Write it down. And then read it to yourself and ask yourself, if I was reading it, if I'm the receiver, do I feel this is rude? You know, and if the answer is yes, it sounds rude, then you might not want to say it to your spouse.
That's right. You don't, you know, because at that point, you know, your level of frustration has gone to an extent that it cannot be controlled, and that's not healthy. You know, we're talking about healthy conversations. We talked about healthy conflicts. You know, we're not speaking about unhealthy conflicts and unhealthy conversations, because that can take place to, you know, take you somewhere else that is not healthy at all for your marriage or your relationship.
Yeah. So I mean, yes, it's difficult. Honesty is very, very difficult. Sometimes it takes years to get somewhere. And I'm sure we can have a conversation with, you know, couples that have been married for 30, 40 years, and they will still tell you, you know, there are still areas that we're still working on our honesty. And then, you know, the most difficult one is once honesty has been broken, like how do you get back to that? You know, maybe unfortunately for couples who've gone through infidelity or trust has been, you know, broken. But the important part is that you never give up on trying to be honest with each other through kindness, through care and love.
That's right.
So we again remind you, this is on I Take D Ministry. Hit us up on Facebook. You can write us a private message if you have any questions. We'll answer that question privately, or if you want us to share a certain topic on the I Take D Ministry. Until next time.